Welcome to another edition of PowerCore Productions and Podcastings, and welcome to your afternoon video for the Daily Dose of the Daily Double. I'm Javon Harrington with PowerCore Productions and Podcastings, and in today's video, we're going to be continuing Jujutsu Kaisen, The Spider's Curse. What if Miles Morales was Sukuna's vessel? Season 1, Part 3. As always, if you're new to the channel or if you're a regular and like what we have to offer, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is PowerCore Productions and Podcastings that's to come out now and in the future. Where we last left off with our series, things took a bit of a turn for the worse. As we had just been introduced to Miles, it seems like his life has now come to an end at the hands of Sukuna. With no choice, Miles passed down the powers of the spider to Megumi Fushiguro as he drew what was seemingly his last breath. Now with Megumi, Yuji, and Nobara being motivated by the death of their friend, they look to get stronger as the upcoming Goodwill Sister School event with their counterpart in Kyoto will be taking place in just a month's time. However, for Miles, his story has not ended the way that you think, but rather, it's only just beginning. But what happens when Miles Morales comes face to face with Ryomen Sukuna? Let's get into today's video. As always, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Miles awoke to find himself in darkness, unsure as to where he was or how he had gotten here. As he looked up at a throne made out of skulls, he saw sitting above him someone that almost looked like his own counterpart, save for being older and covered in the dark markings. Ryomen Sukuna. In either case, Miles wondered where they were. Was this hell? Had he finally died and passed on? Well, he could have thought of better ways to spend his afterlife, but if the threat of Sukuna was at least subsided somewhat, then he could at least consider this a victory of sorts. However, Sukuna would inform Miles that they weren't dead, at least not yet. It felt like it would be pointless to even try, and yet all the same, Miles would charge towards Sukuna as he raced up the throne of skulls, Sukuna dodging the attack as the two of them would land. As Sukuna attempted to counter with a strike of his own, Miles found that his spider senses were still with him, as he was able to counter Sukuna, although Sukuna would land the second hit, as Miles backed away. He used his webbing almost on instinct to grab a large skull before swinging it around towards Sukuna, who caught it with his hand and crushed it, turning it to dust. For Miles, this was a shock. He shouldn't have had his spider powers anymore, but yet he could still feel his faculties about him. His power, it was still here as if it never left. Sukuna would then sigh as he would have to explain what had happened. From being inside of Miles' body, and when Miles had the power of the spider transferred to him, Sukuna was able to understand how this cursed power worked. And in out-of-the-universe explanation, I will be explaining to you all, the audience, how this power works. So, as you're all aware, in this universe, Peter Parker, of this universe in particular, was bitten by a spider that gave off cursed energy. Now, this was pretty similar to any other iteration of Spider-Man, whether it be bitten by a radioactive spider or a cursed spider or things of that nature. It would result in him gaining the powers of a spider, although this would be more cursed energy based as opposed to it being mutated based. Now, because of that, the power is residual, or a better way of explaining it, if you're familiar with how One for All, be more specific, how the power of One for All works in My Hero Academia, how even when the power is passed down, a residual part of the power will always remain with the previous host, similar to how All Might and Deku operated. Although because Deku is now the new host of One for All, he will ultimately be stronger than All Might. The best way to describe it is that for this spider power in particular, it can be passed down from different host to different host. However, the spider power gets stronger with each host that it's transferred to. So take Miles. Even if Miles hadn't become Sukuna's vessel, just by receiving the spider powers in natural order, he would ultimately be a stronger Spider-Man in terms of the spider power than how Peter Parker was. So, when Miles passed down the power to Fushiguro, that means that from a pure power perspective, not taking in Sukuna's power into account, Fushiguro will be a stronger Spider-Man than Miles was. But Miles still retains spider power, it just won't be on the same level that Fushiguro had. However, this is where things would augment, because Sukuna would reason that even if Fushiguro could be a stronger Spider-Man, because Miles was the vessel of Sukuna, with Sukuna's power backing him up, he could still rival and surpass Fushiguro. You could say that it was one of those 1 in a million chances. One of those situations where, under normal circumstances, the rules would always apply. But when you have a curveball like Sukuna, the rules pretty much go out the window. In either case, even if Miles would still retain his spider powers, it wouldn't change the fact that he was still dead. However, Sukuna had a way of fixing that. That being in the form of making a pact. A cursed pact, to be more specific. He would revive the both of them from their brink of death under 2 conditions. First, whenever he mentioned the word extension, he and Miles would trade subconscious, and Sukuna would get 1 full minute with complete control of the body. And second, he would also make Miles forget that he ever made this deal. Of course, Miles didn't want to give in to the trickery of Sukuna. After all, he knew for a fact that nothing Sukuna did was going to be of any benefit to him. He wasn't doing him a favor by making this deal. Sukuna just had his own motives. To sweeten the deal, Sukuna would say that while he took over for that minute, he wouldn't kill anyone of importance to Miles. And that was a promise. Of course, Miles had no reason to trust Sukuna, but this wasn't a matter of trust. A cursed pact was something that couldn't be broken on either side. If Sukuna attempted to break it, he'd be the one that would be punished. And if Miles went past the parameters of the condition as well, then he would suffer the same fate. Of course, all the same, Miles still wasn't going to go along with this, and he decided that whoever won would get what they wanted. If Sukuna won this fight here and now, then Miles would accept the conditions. But if Miles won, then he wanted to be revived with no conditions at all. Of course, that was easier said than done, because just as quickly as Miles had said the word go, he was out for the count. And slowly, he found himself waking up in the morgue, with the coroner, along with Gojo, waiting for him. Gojo smiled happily, seeing that one of his favorite students had now come back from the brink of death, another bright mind ready to re-engage with the world. In the meantime, the others would be preparing, training in their own way. Yuji, however, before going to train, had to make a stop first. He visited the mother of that juvenile who had died. Thankfully, they were able to carry at least the upper half of his body. He was only dismembered from the waist down, so they'd have something to bury. And he took the precautions of making sure that the body would be as in pristine enough condition as it could be. Fushiguro would also help, helping to create an artificial bottom. It wouldn't be his original bottom half, but still, it would provide a full body. The mother would weep tears of sorrow, but even still, Yuji would comfort her. I know how it feels. I lost someone close in my own family, and I lost a friend. But know that my friend fought valiantly to get your son's body back. At the very least, you can give him a proper send-off. No one deserves to die and be forgotten in such a way. The mother would be touched by the words of Itadori. She hugged him. Fushiguro would give his condolences as the two of them left. They were still weighed down by the death of Miles. That act of kindness that he had taken in preserving and protecting the body, for them, it was something admirable and respectable. And because of that, it motivated them to go forward. For Yuji, he was going to be going somewhere else to train for the month. An old friend of Gojo's, a master by the name of Danny Rand, aka the Jujutsu sorcerer, the Iron Fist. For Yuji, out of all of the first years, he was still the newest in terms of using cursed energy, and his brawling fighting style was a lot more conducive to the style of the Iron Fist. Of course, as Yuji would go to the private home in the mountains of Danny Rand, he would find that his sensei was an actually calm and peaceful individual. Around the same age as Gojo, Danny would explain that he had been in the business for a bit. Although he wasn't anything like Gojo, he liked to think he could hold his own. And he too was a friend of Peter Parker. Yuji was sent here by recommendation of Gojo. Gojo believing that Danny had the most capability of bringing out Yuji's full potential. And he believed that even with a month's time, they could do so. Of course, what he had to go through in terms of training took almost 10 plus years. And fortunately, they only had a month. My friend, if you truly want to get strong enough to protect your friends and to truly save as many as you can, well, I'm going to have to put you through hell. Through hell, Yuji would say? Call it baptism by fire. By the end of this month, you're going to be one of two things. You're either going to be strong as hell, or you're going to be dead as hell. There ain't no in between on that. Yuji couldn't help but take a gulp, and he could only imagine what was to come. In the meantime, Fushiguro, along with Nobara, would be training with the other second years, that being in Panda, Toge, and with Maki. For Fushiguro, he had to get accustomed to the new power that was within him, the power of the spider. Out of respect, Gojo gave him Peter's old mask, a red mask that he wore with web-like design. For Fushiguro, he now had to carry on the legacy of both Peter and Miles, a legacy that he would live up to, because now it was his. He was now the Spider-Man. Although, how would his spider powers acclimate to his power of the Shinigami? That was the balance he would have to find within himself. As for Miles, he would be hidden away. You see, it wasn't lost on Gojo that the whole reason for this incident was to serve as little more than a way to get Miles killed. After all, he was the vessel of Sukuna, and Gojo was getting sick and tired of the higher-ups constantly getting in his way, clinging on to the old and minimal traditions that weren't getting them anywhere. Gojo actually had the peace of mind to just going to the higher-ups and slaughtering them all. But in the end, he thought better of it. Killing the higher-ups wouldn't do him any good, because in the end, they'd just end up replacing them with other higher-ups, and nothing would change. And even if he did manage to take over, he knew better than to lead through force and violence. That would only lead to more struggle and strife. Instead, becoming a teacher and influencing the next generation by giving them sound reason and logic, allowing them to come and make their own decisions for themselves, that was the true key. In doing so, he believed that by influencing the young, by gaining their support, then he could truly make a change for the future. And for Miles, he would be practicing controlling his cursed energy as well as perfecting his own curse technique. That came in the form of watching movies, being able to control his emotion, and the best way to do this in Gojo's mind was to have him hold a cursed doll, a doll that had sewn-in punching gloves made by the principal, who had a knack for making cursed objects, like dolls and toys of that nature. This doll had to be satiated. It could only be kept asleep when cursed energy was flowing through it. Not too much and not too little. And whenever it didn't get its right dosage, it would quickly wake up and punch Miles right in the face. For Miles, this is what his training would consist of. Working to control his cursed energy, to truly get the most out of it, to amplify his power. That would help him in terms of using his spider power, and it could allow him to create his own technique. And also, through this training, he could be able to even master the power that was Sukuna, potentially being able to tap into those sort of reserves without having to give up in control. That would be the true key to balance. However, an enemy in the shadows was beginning to make their move. This amalgamation of dark forces that were looking to make a change in the world. There was a man with stitches on his forehead. Of course, to the naked eye, it would appear as if he were all alone, but I can assure you he was not. There were others who accompanied him, weird, deformed beings, cursed spirits, if you will. Among them, a fiery one by the name of Jugo. For these cursed spirits, they believed that they were the original, that they were the rightful inheritors of the earth, and that the humans were the fallible ones. After all, cursed spirits are made from the negative desires of humans, the negative emotions that we keep hidden deep inside, the things that we don't want to have exposed. For example, when you see someone that you don't like, someone that you truly despise, and yet you give them kind words and pleasantries, isn't the kind words the false self that's not the real you? The real you hates this person, loathes this person, despises this person, and that festering hatred grows into a curse. So if anything, the curse is the true self, not the false platitudes that one displays in public. This feeling of truth and self is what drove these curses, as they were the ones who believed that they were the rightful ones to inherit the world. They found themselves being led by a man named Gojo. Gojo, he also shared in these sentiments. However, for them to accomplish their goals, two things would be required: the removal of Satoru Gojo, and getting Miles and Sukuna on their side. Of course, you could always try to kill Satoru Gojo. You might cause a lot of collateral damage in the process, but in truth, you wouldn't get very far. No, the only way to remove him was to seal him with a seal known as Prison Realm. However, there was a date and time in which it could be used most effective. The signs of summer were just starting to come into bloom, but the day would not be long. In Shibuya, on October 31st, that is the day that they would make their move. However, some were more patient than others. Jugo not being on the side of patience, as in one night, he attempted to make a move of his own, an ambush on the road, attempting to take out the famed Jujutsu sorcerer. At first, he thought that he had managed to succeed, that Gojo couldn't possibly live to the hype. However, if that's what he thought, then, as I'm sure you all know, he was gravely mistaken. Gojo made easy work of Jugo. Not only that, but even bringing Miles along as a way of making it a teaching moment. And today's lesson, domains. A realm created using cursed energy. You could say it's like one's own personal space, a void if you will. When two domains are created, the more refined and perfected one will win out in the end. With Jugo attempting to use his domain expansion, a realm where anyone's attacks are guaranteed to hit to the fullest extent, Gojo would show the difference between the two, as he revealed his true power, his domain expansion, Infinite Void. A place where one receives everything, all the knowledge, all the power, everything they could ever crave, but their senses are too dull to even make use of it. In regard of being given everything, you can do nothing. Gojo would then rip off the head of Jugo. He was going to interrogate him to get some information. However, Jugo's allies would make sure that their friend would get to safety, protecting a comrade in arms. As a cursed spirit, one made of plants and radiating of sage and nature, would save their partner at the last moment, as Gojo would rescue Miles from a trap, the two of them watching on as their enemies would escape. Of course, Gojo had to commend them for their efforts, but even still, they weren't anything all that powerful. In fact, they're pretty weak. So, for now, the only thing they could do was stay focused on the task at hand, as Miles would continue on in his training, and everyone else, as the day of the Kyoto Goodwill Sister School Festival event loomed in the distance, their allies and their enemies growing ever stronger. In a world of black and white, our heroes and our enemies found themselves caught in the shade of gray. This concludes Jujutsu Kaisen, The Spire's Curse. What if Miles Morales was Sukuna's vessel? Season 1, Part 3. As always, if you enjoyed today's video and everything else that we have to offer, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is PowerCore Productions and Podcasting's that's to come out now and in the future. Make sure, if you haven't, to check out today's previous video and stay tuned for tomorrow's set of videos, as we'll be doing yet another dose of the Daily Double. But anyway, that's going to do it for the end of today's video. I'm Javon Harrington with PowerCore Productions and Podcasting's signing off, and I'll see you next time.